Alright, I'd like to give a shout out to Will Be Black Starline. He provided me some information regarding Booker T as well as Robert Moulton, which I'm going to present in the next section. So anytime someone sends me some information that I present on, I like to acknowledge them for shooting me that information. So appreciate you, bro. So go ahead to Will Be Black Starline and make sure you subscribe and like. So for this type of wealth, who's going to take over? Who's going to sit in his chair, a powerful man like that? You know, who's going to sit in his chair? Dr. Robert Moulton. Well, who is he? Anybody ever heard of him? Well, he's the one that replaces Booker T after Booker T's mysterious death. And he ran Tuskegee until 1935. From 1915 till 1935, 20 years. Well, let's look a little bit about his history. Robert Moulton was the grandson of an African chieftain who had grown wealthy by engaged in slave trading. Later, this chief himself was sold into slavery. That's how Moulton and his family got here to America. There's also a connection between Robert Moulton and President Herbert Hoover. Well, when Herbert Hoover was running for president for the 1928 election, he was told by some of his friends that he needed to get some big Negroes to silence many of the critics. And one of the things people were criticizing is the fact that there was a major flood that took place in 1927. Okay? And in 1927, this major flood flooded areas of Louisiana, Arkansas, Mississippi, and you can see this water was 30 feet deep. And there's also a report here showing that the flood of 1927 covered the entire delta of Greenville, Mississippi levee, and it was on the high, safe place for refugees. So a lot of black African Americans had to go highest, up on the levee. Well, there's reports of them being forced to work at gunpoint. A lot of them are starving for food and shelter. I mean, just horrible conditions was going on at that particular time. And nobody's doing anything about it. So, Hoover calls Moulton. Remember, Moulton is still running the Tuskegee University. He's sitting in Booker T. Washington's chair. And they ask him, can he go investigate what's happening on the levees and what's happening with these Africans who are supposed to be suffering. So what does he do? He goes out there and he investigates, and he comes back to Hoover and he tells Hoover, yes, they're right. The conditions there is horrible. They're deplorable. So guess what? Guess what Hoover told him? Hoover told him if he keeps a tight lip about what the conditions are there, when he becomes president, he'll have a position for him in his cabinet. He also told him that he would have some farmland that he can give him and some Negroes. So just keep a tight lip. Don't say nothing about it. What do you think Moulton did? He kept a tight lip. Well, Booker T. Washington would have done that. Allowed children and families. Over 200,000 African Americans are starving, homeless, and don't do nothing about it. Would Booker T. Washington would have done that? Oh no, I don't think so. Okay, but anyway. And what happened in the election of 1928? Yes, Herbert Hoover became president, and what did he do with Moulton? He ignored Robert Moulton. That's why in the following election of 1932, Moulton withdrew his support for Hoover and switched to the Democratic Party. What's ironic is this is the same year, 1932, that Moulton agreed to have the Tuskegee Experiment come to his campus and experiment on black people. 1932 to 1972. 40-year guinea pig program. And as I said here, 128 of these men died. 40 of their wives became infected, and 19 of their children were born with congenital syphilis. So this was no joke, folks. We had 399 men in the syphilitic group who were initially recruited because they were already had latent syphilis, and then we had 201 men in the control group that did not have the disease at all. Men were undergoing excruciating spinal tap diagnostic tests to see if their neurological system was affected from the untreated syphilis. They were lied to and told these spinal taps were a treatment for their bad blood. All right, and don't ever believe it when they tell you that they have to do the Tuskegee experiment so that they can actually understand what would happen if you had untreated syphilis, because they already had that study. If you look at the Oslo study, it's Oslo, Norway, and this is in the Journal of Chronic Diseases, Volume 2. Issue 3 is September of 1955, and it goes through the first, you could say, syphilis study that was done, and you had over 2,000 patients in this one. The only difference is they only did this for 12 months. The average was about 3.6 months. And then the other thing here that they mention at the end of this article, first of all, this is very key. They said that the mortality from syphilis amongst males was twice that of females. Key to look at. Also, it says at the end of this whole document, it says this is probably the most comprehensive study on untreated syphilis that's yet been made, and the great mass of data that has been collected will provide the basis for additional contributions to our knowledge of syphilis infection. This brief review cannot do justice to this monumental piece of work comprising a monograph of some 500 pages with 83 tables, 12 figures, 70 pages with 30 tables and 2 figures. The annex with 70 pages and 30 tables and 2 figures, they got the information here. So they need to experiment on our people because the information was here on how syphilis affects the body. But they use our bodies as guinea pigs.
Once you had penicillin, why wasn't the option given to these men to use it?
Because if we had done that, then all the information we had up to that point would have been negated. That's all.
You basically substituted your judgment for theirs?
My judgment? I didn't start the study. It was part of the job I had when I was put in charge of this lab.
But you were director of the studies for some very crucial years when penicillin was available. So you substituted your judgment, didn't you?
Well, don't you always as a physician?
The government doctors would never have conceived of doing this experiment on themselves.
I don't know, but I just don't know.
How many doctors do you know who would have put up with this?
No, not many, of course. You know better than that. It's a trick question.
You wonder about a government like that, and you wonder about whether or not this could happen again.
All right, these are the Tuskegee Experiment culprits, and we're about to go into each one of them and tell you how they participated in this particular experiment. Okay, first person here is Dr. Clark. Now, Dr. Clark was the very first director of the experiment, and he defended the deception of telling the men in the study that this excruciating pain that they were going through when they get these spinal taps, that was necessary to help heal their bad blood, not that it was a diagnostic test to see if they actually had neurological damage from having untreated syphilis. So that's his role. And his right-hand man, the other person here, his name is Dr. Raymond Vonderlaer. He's the on-site director. And the Tuskegee experiment would have only lasted a year. However, he lobbied after after Dr. Clark retired, he ended up taking over, and he was able to implement his plan, which was to continue the Tuskegee Experiment. And so that's his role. And this is your third doctor over the Tuskegee Experiment, Dr. Oliver Wenger. Now, I'm not one to judge people based on looks, but if you go to your doctor's office and you walk in and he looks like this, you better you better run the opposite direction. Anyway, this no laughing matter, but Dr. Oliver Wenger, he was very enthusiastic in mass screenings and treatment of black communities, and he supported a policy of concealing the aims of the experiment with the men, or what they call subjects. So that was his role. Let's keep it moving. The fourth person here is Dr. Eugene Dibble. He was head of John Andrews Hospital, and as we know, that was the hospital that's on the campus of Tuskegee University. It was kind of the medical wing of the university, and he's the one that recommended Nurse Rivers. There wouldn't have been a Nurse Rivers without his recommendation. He recommended her to Dr. Moulton, and he also lobbied for Moulton to approve this study. He was saying that, oh, this study can give valuable training to our students and our interns, and Moulton went for it. And so that's his role in the Tuskegee. Let's go to the next person. All of us know about Nurse Eunice Rivers. She was the liaison between the doctors and the black community. If they came out themselves, people would trust them. But they had to have someone who was compassionate, a nurse, a sister. So she was actually used because she had a connection with the community. And as you can see here, she's greeting one of the brothers as part of the experiment. And then you can see some of the overseers, or the string pullers behind her, the ones who really pulling the strings behind the experiment. And as you can see, these brothers really had trust in her. She had a good rapport with the community. It looks like she might be giving him a check.
And I'm pinning on them.
We had an arrangement with the funeral directors that if we got the post, they got the money to bury him.
If you got the postmortem, the autopsy.
If we were able to do it. And they took out just some tissue. They were most interested in the heart, brain, the liver.
Do you know what an autopsy is?
Well, not exactly.
In 1972, following a flurry of news reports, the Tuskegee study was finally stopped. Congressional testimony by Herman Shaw, among others, led to the first regulations on human medical experimentation and a lawsuit. Survivors were awarded $32,000 each, less than $1,000 for every year they were in the study.
There's no way for me to explain the pain that we went through with those different doctors, with no care and no respect for a human being.
The end result of the experiments. What was learned?
Syphilis isn't too bad a disease.
That was the only thing learned after all of these men were left untreated for all of these years, all of the questions of possible immoral, unethical practices. That's all that was learned.
On the basis of when the study stopped, we didn't learn very much. True. We learned that they're nice people back there.
Place for this year. Welcome, Mr. Herman Shaw.
We were treated unfairly, to some extent, like guinea pigs. We were not pigs. We were not dancing boys. We were projected in the movie on Miss Evers' Boys. We were all hard-working men and not boys, and citizens of the United States. The wounds that were inflicted upon us cannot be undone. I'm saddened today to think of those who did not survive and whose families will forever live with the knowledge that their death and suffering was preventable. Mr. President,
we can look at you in the eye and finally say, on behalf of the American people, what the United States government did was shameful, and I am sorry. And I am sorry. And I am sorry.
All right, so after Bill Clinton gave his apology, he agreed to give the Tuskegee University $200,000 to start the bioethics and research facility. Was actually supposed to be somewhat of a watchdog organization that's supposed to look out. I think that's a very important and very crucial thing to do. It was a very important thing to do. It's just that it's important if you're going to really look out for black people. But I've been checking out the center to see what you guys are doing out there in Alabama. If this is considered to be a national group that's supposed to be looking out for all of us throughout the United States, then you have to be on point. Because right now I'm looking at the directors of your organizations that are promoting this new experimental vaccine and saying, go ahead and do it, go ahead and take it. Okay, I see that going on. Also, I see you guys criticizing some of the African Americans that are not agreeing to these harsh, toxic AIDS medications. You put that right on your website. And so you need to really be checked on that. Do your research in those particular areas. Do your research on this particular vaccine before you push that. Okay. All right, just so a few people might think that I'm making this up. Yeah, there was actually a conference that took place 5 days ago, and it was done at Tuskegee University at the National Center for Bioethics, and this is the very center that was created and started out of the donation to Tuskegee after the apology from Bill Clinton. And supposedly this is a watchdog organization to make the medical field have more ethics. It was kind of like a organization that was to make sure that happens. And so they had this conference. I saw some of the dialogue. I did get a chance to view the whole conference here, but I did listen to some of the dialogue. Dr. David Hodges, I think he's one of the main guys with this group. And I was when I first listened to him, I was kind of agreeing with what he was talking about they got to be some trustworthiness before you can put trust in somebody. Because if you look at someone's track record, you look at what happened with the Tuskegee. But then after he says all of this and talk about the atrocities and this and that, then at the very end he said we should go ahead and take the vaccine. I mean, really? And so, and this is his brother right here over to the left at the bottom. He looks like a little young brother right here. But then I pulled him up again because I went on, because I don't just stop. When I hear people pushing something, I'm going to check out who you are. And he don't even look like this. That is probably a very old picture. But we're going to pull up what this brother look like. This is Dr. Hodge. All right? So let's present ourselves who we are. So let's keep things in perspective. This is Dr. Hodge, okay? And I'm going to pinpoint some of his points. All right, let's draw our attention to this article right here. Racist history of research could hinder COVID-19 vaccines, but an Alabama university wants to help. What Alabama university wants to help with an experimental vaccine? Tuskegee University? Are you serious? Okay, so anyway, I'm going to read this article. This article right here, they had some comments from some of the what they call experts from Tuskegee and Harvard. And it says, recently 4 experts from Tuskegee and Harvard University wrote an article in the New England Journal of Medicine urging researchers to convince black volunteers they can be trusted. Black people account for 21% of the deaths of corona, but only 3% of the vaccine volunteers. And then here you go. Okay, and this is David Hodge, Associate Director of Education at Tuskegee University National Center for Bioethics in Healthcare and Research. He said that the lack of minority participation undermines trial results. He goes on to say, black participation should be around 13 to 14%. Because historical distrust of medical research, blacks have not been participating at that level, and that is not good for anybody. So this is a organization that was set up after we were experimented upon, and it's supposed to be a watchdog organization that's promoting for us to be further experimented on. I'm just trying to understand. All right, so I thank everybody for joining the Black Health Report today. I'm going to end with wishing a warm happy birthday, 90th birthday, 90 years young, to civil rights attorney Fred Gray, who worked for over 25 years to make sure that these brothers were getting some type of compensation, even though they didn't get just due. But he did work hard. We want to give it up for brother for giving it his all. Brother Fred Gray, still fighting for our people at 90 years old. All right, so now I'd like to thank all of you guys for checking me out today. Make sure you subscribe to my channel. I'm trying to get 1,000 subscribers, okay? All right, nowhere near that. So subscribe. It's Ask Thabiti. Subscribe and like. Until next time, stay positive, stay safe. One love.